the chairman has appropriately outlined the pattern of funding for NIH over time. There's a piece of that concerns me. Beauty lies in the eyes of the genuflector, and with NIH funding, we had a very significant increase in the 09 fiscal year as a result of the stimulus package. And I have some questions about that, but most importantly, I'm concerned that even though the President's budget has a $1 billion adjustment, if you take where we were in 09 and that dollar amount, one could argue that there's an $8 billion reduction if real value came from that stimulus funding. And so I'd like to have some commentary regarding that and how you've budgeted to try to deal with that adjustment if it remains as a part of our pattern, and very much be interested in knowing, maybe Dr. Fauci would like to respond to this piece of it. There has been consistent adjustment also for labor, health, and human services across the board, with a similar big adjustment in 09. If I were looking at those adjustments and readjusting budgets, I would make sure that continuing funding flowing to NIH would have very high priority in those considerations. There's a broadly based, nonpartisan support for research, applied research, as well as the basic research. Lots of discussion that's healthy, pushing you to get more in the direction of the applied research, but nonetheless, we need to preserve this nonpartisan environment in this committee and otherwise. And so if you'd start with that, Dr. Collins, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Lewis, I appreciate the question, and I do appreciate the strong bipartisan support for medical research that has characterized the actions of this subcommittee for many years. The diagram that you see on the screen there shows you what the total funding allocated for NIH has been over the course of the past decade. And as you can see, after a period of flat funding from 2003 to 2008 with only modest increases, then, as shown in red, the Recovery Act dollars, $10.4 billion, were given to NIH, but obviously as a two-year enterprise, so roughly $5 billion each year. And the President's budget is here shown for FY11, and I think you can see the delta there. And in fact, this is the cliff that people are talking about. Because effectively in FY10, if you include the Recovery Act dollars, the total funding that NIH has had available is $36 billion. What's proposed in the President's budget is $32. Now let me say that given the very difficult economic times, the President's support of science and the willingness to put forward a $1 billion increase for NIH is reflective of the administration's strong support for research and what it can do. And we are deeply grateful for that, because certainly it could have been justified at a time of growing deficits to be even more conservative here in terms of providing support for this. So the $1 billion is certainly something we're delighted to see come forward, although it is a dollar figure which basically matches the inflationary index for biomedical research, just about 3.2%. We were aware that this might be an outcome. What we have tried to do, although I would not tell you that we are going to be completely successful in reducing the consequences of this cliff, certainly some of the money funded by Recovery Act has been for one-time expenditures. Special equipment needs, for instance, that universities across this country have been clamoring for years during the flat funding. Construction grants also to help those universities and institutes build up their physical plant or to do some renovations that are badly needed. We've tried to fund special projects that we thought could get done in 2 years. The Cancer Genome Atlas, which went from a pilot phase into a full-bore assault on understanding cancer, and which with that accelerated funding will tell us in 2 years the basic landscape of cancer for the 20 most common cancers at the DNA level, a dramatic series of advances. But we also funded a lot of innovative grants. We invited investigators out there to come forward with their best ideas, and they came forward in great numbers with exciting, innovative stuff. When I arrived at NIH in August, one of my first tasks in those first few weeks was to read a lot of these grants that came forward asking for support from the Recovery Act. And these were really exciting, innovative, many from investigators that hadn't previously come forward to NIH. But science is, as I said in my opening statement, it's not a 100-yard dash, it's a marathon, and 2-year cycles are really not the way that advances occur. So we are going to face a crunch in FY11. We will be, I think, gracious to investigators who were funded during the Recovery Act for 2 years and who ask, could they please have a no-cost extension for a third year. We will probably, with good justification, be willing to do that in order to try to smooth this out a bit. But there is no question that if you measure what happens in terms of success rates, that is, what's the chance that an investigator who sends a grant into NIH is going to actually get funded, that is going to be a tough number in FY11. That number used to be, back in the course of the last 30 years, around 25 to 35%. That was the success rate for grantees. It has trickled down more recently to 20%. Our predictions are that in FY11, with this budget number, it will be more like 15%, one grant out of every.
Dr. Collins, your response has taken up my time, but in the
meantime,
I would hope, as you see some of those vacuums or difficulties, that you and your people, Dr. Fauci, would keep very much in touch with this committee so that we can try to be responsive in ways that will accelerate those opportunities. A couple of our members suffered from Parkinson's, and that led some of us to organize in a nonpartisan way an environment where people who were doing research and treatment across the country came together, spent about like a day and a half together. The amazing thing to me at the bottom line was that they had never talked to each other in a significant level before, emphasizing that which has been said several ways here today, the need to have voices within your institution pushing the kind of coordination that allows for us to tap many, many resources. Years ago, we specifically were interested in the proton therapy process. At that time, NIH was not interested in the proton. I don't know if it was based upon cost or what, but they were not interested. So we took that issue to a hearing at the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee of Appropriations rather than this subcommittee. And as a result of that, that subcommittee had about a dozen members on it, and 10 of them had cancer in their family. They were very interested, and initial funding went forward. Since that time, it's been suggested that this might be a great item for rationing because of relative cost for treatment. Even though initially we knew there were prospects for small tumors in the brain, great success with prostate cancer, most recently great success with non-invasive breast cancer treatment. But above and beyond that, NASA is very fascinated with this work because of how it can help them understand better the effects of radiation upon man, perhaps in space. Well, that sort of coordination and communication could cause NIH to help us very much tenor and hold back the tendency to want to cut off avenues of research as well as treatment because of cost alone. So I'd urge that to become a priority.